Welcome to the Casey Ingram Show Meet Your Candidate series. No spin, no agenda, no endorsements, just the candidate. Before we begin, I'd like to thank the many listeners who submitted questions for this interview. Several of those questions have been incorporated into today's discussion. Questions are not shared with the candidates prior to the interview. If you enjoy the show and would like to stay informed on local issues and elections, be sure to hit that subscribe button. I'm Casey Ingram. Let's get into it. Susan Overart is running for Martin County Commission District 2. Welcome to the show, Susan.
Thank you very much, Casey. Pleasure to
Many
be here.
voters are just beginning to learn about you, Susan. So tell us a little bit about your professional background, your involvement in Martin County, and what motivated you to run for the county commission.
Okay, I have been a resident of Martin County. I moved here in 2001, so a little over 24 years. I've been a business owner during that same time. I am a graduate of Vanderbilt University, earning my engineering degree, which is what my small business is. That was O'Rourke Engineering and Planning here in town. I have three sons. My oldest is currently working on his PhD in genetics at University of Missouri and Columbia. My middle son, who recently was married, is an electrical engineer in Connecticut. And my youngest son graduated from the Naval Academy last year, Quantico this year, and he is currently serving at Okinawa in Japan. They were all raised here, went to school here, and as a result, I participated in a number of activities with them when they were younger. I coached basketball, I was a team mother. I was on the robotics team board, and I've also participated in a number of community endeavors such as Meals on Wheels, and I'm currently at Habitat for Humanity board. Sit on a committee for affordable housing with the House of Hope. I work at the packing plant for House of Hope on Fridays, and I also participate in a group called Better Together, which is like short-term foster care. So
Very accomplished. Your sons, especially. Congratulations on that. And congratulations on, sounds like a new daughter in law to the family. So
yes,
very exciting.
thank
You
you.
mentioned you mentioned robotics, Susan. That's our spam team, is that right? The ones that's led the Macy's Day Parade not that long ago. It's been a few
Correct.
years. Awesome,
I'm
awesome.
sorry.
So
Yes.
I know it's got this overlap between
It
the
was
two
a
of you.
big deal for me because it's a great mentorship program for students. It's a great program. I used to use it. I was on the LPA and a couple of boards, and I would say to the people that you all need to go to the robotics tournaments because there's a great lesson that you could have 64 teams. They get one problem set, one question at the beginning of the season, and each team selects a slightly different way to achieve that goal. So when you go to a tournament, there are a number of rules at play. You're there to win, but you're also there to show your team spirit, to work with others and bring them up. But that understanding that there were 64 different ways to answer the question and we can learn from each other, that's a great takeaway that we all should carry with us. So,
It is in any walk of life. I completely agree with you. It's having that open mind and learning. You never know what you're going to learn from somebody else's experiences or thoughts. So now, Susan, what experiences have best prepared you to oversee a county government and a budget around $800 million?
sure. I've run a business for many years. It's not 700 million, 800 million for sure, but I've been in the private and public sector, and I have worked on a number of projects with public sector agencies. When I was out in California, I had my business there originally for 12 years. I worked on a number of large projects, aquifers, storage projects. If you're not familiar with California policies, it's everything gets a lot of analysis. And when you're doing like a CEQA or NEPA analysis, all of the team members are in one place. So all the value engineering gets done in front of each other. So it was a good place to learn what was going on a whole project basis. I'm also been involved in Martin County in my role as a traffic engineer. I've participated in working with the MPO to understand where the money is being spent and how do we best match up our roads and services with the population that's coming in and where is it coming. So I think that those tools of running a business and managing large scale public projects give me a little bit of a step above my competitors.
So, Susan, let me ask about that because with you being a traffic engineer, that's probably one of the biggest complaints you hear just around the county is, oh my goodness, the traffic is so bad. Infrastructure is not keeping up with the amount of population that's growing, or people coming here, or driving through from Port St. Lucie, whatever it might be. How do you envision, being able to help with that traffic congestion?
The things is, I know perspective is reality, but because I get asked this a lot, I actually went back and I looked at 2016 volumes on our roadways. So, how much traffic is traveling down the road. And for example, on US 1, the numbers are largely the same. And I know that's hard to believe, but they are largely the same between 2016 and 2026. I'm not saying we still don't need to do something about it, but the little tweaks that have been done over the years kind of make you feel that it is remaining the same. But we get about 30% of the traffic comes from St. Lucie County, in the morning and afternoon rush hour, 5% from Palm Beach County. And after COVID, which is part of one of the reasons we don't see that volume increase on the roadways that you might expect, is that we're now looking at like 19 to 20% of people working from home. I also think that some of our housing stock has improved. And while people might expect to see traffic coming from certain types of development, a lot of it is a movement of traffic. So people who were living in Palm Beach County or in St. Lucie County now found a home in Stewart. So they're the same people on the roads. We're not adding new people to the roads. But I think one of the problems is we've addressed traffic strictly as a development issue. Like, we discuss development and we don't discuss traffic solutions. And I want to bring the focus back to that we need to look at solutions. We've got a lot of things get put in our budget and then they get pushed out. They get deprioritized, and we can't be doing that. We have to make sure that roadway improvements are in place, that they get funded, and we don't keep pushing them back, because that's where the frustration comes in. Because there's certain roads we don't want to widen. We don't want to do things. We want to retain a rural character. So the roads that are being improved need to be improved so that the spillover doesn't go into these other roads that we don't want to ever be improved. So, there are some things I mentioned, like I think I might have said Canner and Monterey, but I meant US 1 and Canner. That's a major intersection. We have an improvement in there. I want to take a look at it. I have some ideas of what I'd like to see happen there, but I know that's an intersection that it's one of the busiest intersections in the county. And we've been waiting a long time for something to happen. And interestingly enough, when the state first analyzed it, they said everything was good. And I'm like, no, it can't be. Drive through there, 5 times a day. So I think that's an area that I can push back on the state. I can work with staff to push back and assist and look at other alternatives. Because one of the benefits about having been a transportation consultant, not only in California, but throughout South Florida, I can see what other areas are doing, what's working in other communities. And I can bring that to the staff who's here in Martin County. So that's a few.
Thank you. Now, why are you running for the county commission, and why now?
Well, there's a couple reasons. You may know I ran 20 years ago. It was something that I always felt that you could serve in public office. And that's when I graduated from high school, I wanted to be the mayor of Miami, but that quickly, became something of the past. So I was looking for that opportunity of when the time is right. I had a comment was made when I ran 20 years ago that I was too young and I needed to stay home and take care of my children. Better or worse, that's what I did. I did stay home and take care of my children. I worked full time during that time. They turned out to be pretty amazing. And now I find myself with a lot of time, and I took surf lessons and I went on trips. I hiked Machu Picchu and played a lot of pickleball, and said, so I need to do something else. I started coming back to the city meetings, the county meetings, and I didn't really like what I saw. I mean, honestly, there's a place for disagreement and there's a way that it needs to be done. I saw the unraveling of rules that maybe the intention started out good, but it didn't result in a good result. And I was concerned when it appeared to me that the male opposition was going to run unopposed. And I had my house here. And I know for some people, I move very quickly. I don't mean just moving into a house, but I do things very quickly. I mentioned to somebody, one of my landlords said, you're the kind of person who wants to put 10 pounds in a 5-pound bag. I like things done quickly. I don't know if you've ever had like a project you need done and you decide to have a party because if you do that party this weekend, you're going to get that thing done. So It's kind of like that for me. I'm going to go ahead and move now. Don't have to deal with address changes, whatnot. I own the house. I've had it. I've been waiting to do something with it. Just get in it. And, if I'm running for office logistically, I need to be here and start, just hit the ground running. So I think it's a great fit for me this time in my life. I have the ability to serve. I have nobody here in the house saying I need to be home at a certain time. I need to do this. I don't have a company that says, you need to put in 85 hours. I'm my own person and I'm committed to the county.
Thank you for that. And of course, we have to address it's one of the largest topics of your candidacy is the residency. Just address it once here. You addressed it multiple times at the forum this past weekend. But for folks that didn't see the forum or watch it, let's go ahead and address it. You had a
Yeah, I
homestead
mean,
at home
I,
in St.
I
In just
think
like
it's it's a non-issue that became a big issue. I
yeah,
had,
it's one of the things that's come up over the years, and I appreciate you, Dana. Just give the background. The homestead was in St. Lucie County. Your house here is in District 1. You're running for District 2.
Mhm.
Go ahead. I'll let you just address that for
Yeah.
the
So
folks
I
that are
think the most
listening.
important thing is that I lived in District 2 for 24 years prior to selling the family home. And if anybody's ever been through the empty nest process, you're in your house, the dog dies, and now you're walking around a 4-bedroom house, basically by yourself. So I purchased a home in Nettles Island prior to selling the family home so I could move everything up there. I wasn't ready to get rid of my son's things and, I didn't know which memorabilia, et cetera. So I moved up there, spent a couple months up there. I didn't move in there until probably the house sold in August. So my son got married in September. So really after that time, between August and beginning of September, something like that. And the people were lovely. It's a much slower process. My house is about a mile and a tenth of a mile. And if anybody knows me, going 10 to 20 miles per hour for that mile and a tenth became a very long process. And I wasn't ready to be on spring break, monthly. So I bought this house and said, I was here all the time anyway, and I'm driving a lot back and forth. I found I'm trying to logistically group things together. So I bought this house. It's a 1930s Spanish colonial, and it's going to need some special love. So that was the delay in making the move sooner. And as I said, once I made the decision to run, I just said, get in the house, and this is a good incentive to just get it done. So I'm sitting here. You can see my Navy poster behind me. And
Yes.
so that's the story. It's going to go to court. And I believe with 100% certainty, it will be found in my favor. And, in reality, like anybody who put their address on, it should have been a non-issue. And I don't think anybody else had their addresses checked or their houses filmed or anything like that. But it'll be resolved soon. And I'm sure when it is, the people who were opposed to me, and they're going to think that's a lie too. And they're going to have some conspiracy about the judge, and God bless them. But I think it shouldn't be the focus. We have a lot of things to deal with. And I'm looking forward to moving past that.
Perfect. And you'll move into District 2 because the house I just
Oh,
was
yes. The
it's in
second
District
part,
1.
I have already purchased a place in District 2, and I am going to I haven't decided if I'm going to request privacy as a result of the harassment that I received at this location.
Got
So
it.
I have not divulged that address yet, but yeah,
Okay.
it's already been done. So
Thank you, Susan. It's out there, so we have to ask about it.
certainly, I understand.
Certainly. Okay. Moving on to some other topics. What do you believe is the biggest challenge facing Martin County over the next 4 years?
I do think I won't say that the tax reform, except if there is tax reform, I don't think we should look at well, let's say tax reform. And I'll say tax reform, not because if the referendum passes, whether the referendum passes or not, a sitting commissioner should understand that people are frustrated and that trying to make things more affordable for the citizens should be a priority. And I accept, and I do believe that protecting our waters and the ecosystem, conservation lands, super important. And we have so many tools that I say, I want to come alongside and continue that legacy. But we can't forget these other areas of importance in people's lives that are their day-to-day things. People want to go to the beach and have it be clean. They want to have the clean water. They also want to be able to pay their bills. And to the extent that we don't contribute to making their lives more difficult, that should be a topic either way, because this is coming up because of a failure to address affordability. There's, depending where you are in the income bracket, certain things affect you and certain things don't. And some
Right.
of the homestead stuff really will help. It's going to help homeowners. It's not going to help non-homeowners. And it may make it worse for non-homeowners. There's always that disparity in how we spread the taxes around. We have to be careful. So that's the other thing. I think the issue of development and growth is an issue that has to be understood and dealt with, but it shouldn't be one that precludes us from dealing with all the other important issues in the county. And a lot of times we get candidates who are growth or no growth, but they don't have any other substance to deal with the rest of the business of the Martin County citizens. And so I think that's a threat. And so I believe that my experience and my understanding of both sides, I was hired initially when I moved here to work with Palm Beach County on their land development regulations related to traffic and concurrency as a consultant to the county. I then did the same thing for the town of Jupiter. They did not see the fact that had, experience in the public and private sector as a negative thing. They saw it as an asset because I understood both sides of the equation. And I think I bring that here to Martin County so I can be a help in that arena. So I think I named a couple things that I think are challenges. So
Absolutely. So, if you are elected, what would be your top three priorities during your first year in office?
So I actually put out a piece this morning on the first 100 days, and how that expanded into the year. I'd have to evolve on that a little bit. But the reason I went with the first 100 days is I do have a strength and an understanding in the whole transportation arena. So I think I could hit the ground running there. And I do believe I could come up with some regulations immediately. One of the things as a traffic engineer, when I'd go to meetings, and we would say, people would ask us questions and we would say, well, that's not required. So we didn't always have that information. So after years of hearing people say, could this be in a traffic study? Could you present this at a public hearing? I think we can add some of those requirements to the traffic studies so that when there is any kind of development or change, there's certain information that the citizens, the residents want to know about, and we can have that as a requirement to be put in. The other thing is I'd like to see, and I think we could do something quickly relative to impact fees, where the impact fees just don't go into a pool that nobody ever sees how they got used. If there is a project that people want or has to be put in because of SB 102, that those impact fees, because they still pay impact fees, those impact fees could be used for the infrastructure to offset the impacts of those developments. So those are a couple things really quick. I also put out that I'd like to get involved immediately with the MPO. I'm not sure who's in that seat at the moment, but and talk to the different. I wanted to get with law enforcement and with engineering to focus on the high crash areas, because I said, I don't know if it's just Facebook algorithms, but it seems like there are a lot, and it's got to be a two-prong. The guys out there, women and men who are working in law enforcement and first responders, they see something we don't see necessarily as the practitioners, the engineers. And so there may be a way, something we're missing that we can look at and incorporate into these projects moving forward, or if we need to promote something. So that's something I feel like I can do right away. I also would like to get a handle on homelessness, affordability, and mental health. I feel like there's a lot of talk and different people have a little bit to do with it. I know we lost some money and some line item vetoes relative to those areas. So I'd like to get in the first 100 days a handle on what that is, so that moving into the rest of the year, I think those are areas that need some focus. There's other people want to focus on the development pattern, or they want to focus on clean water, and they're doing a great job. The county's got people in place. And if I'm needed in those areas, certainly I would pivot and, do whatever I need. And I, of course, would make decisions on that. But I see myself as having some time and being more of a working commissioner, as much as I will be allowed to, and not interfere with, the Don's staff.
There you go. I agree with you. It does seem like we see a lot of accidents on Facebook, and I think how impactful it is how severe the accidents are. It's not just fender benders we're seeing where they're, completely totaled cars. And so I agree with you there. Susan, you said that people come in, through the MPO or, working with the government over the years, they'd ask for something, it's not there because it's not required. You would maybe try and help change those things. Can you just give me one or two examples of those requirements that aren't there now that you see would be useful?
Yeah. So some of the things that, the traffic studies have a very small focus on concurrency. And so say we do, like, one of the things is we do peak hour analysis, but when you get out there, people want to ask us, like, we usually only have to do in Martin County one of the, like, the worst case. And I used to say when we were doing the studies, but I'm in a hearing and they say, but they don't want to have to check things that aren't required. You know what I mean? So we, from the engineer's perspective, it's the worst case scenario. So, but to the people who don't know it, and because traffic is such a public thing and people feel it very much, it's really not that hard if we throw in the morning, the afternoon rush hour, and we put some information on what's happening through the day. And the other thing I'd like to see is there where an applicant is not required because of the rules. There's, and you've probably heard me say it, it's not my obligation because it's an existing failure. And that makes no sense to the public. I get that. But one of the things I'd like to see us do from the county, even if I can't make an applicant do something because they're protected by state law, I could still have them analyze it and come up with some recommendations that would help me as a commissioner, would help staff. We won't have to do that analysis now. So at least we get the analysis, we get the benefit of another person's opinion. Then we can take that information and perhaps add that to, potential funding list. But it would be like, at least use our technical resources and don't just let it be. We don't need to do that. So that's a couple. I know they're small things, but I think they would make a big difference. And I don't think anyone's going to push back on that.
Well, we could definitely see and hear your engineering background here because you're very analytical on how you think about these things. So definitely very interesting. And I think those are great ideas and it would help address, a lot of people's concerns because they feel like the studies are not all encompassing if you're only using certain hours. So thank you for sharing. So, next topic, Susan. Martin County has committed land valued at nearly $3 million and identified up to $15 million in potential local matching funds if outside grants become available for a Brightline station, estimated to cost taxpayers over $87 million. Brightline has reported more than $5.5 billion in debt and is facing significant financial challenges meeting its debt obligations and is considering bankruptcy. Given those concerns, do you support using county land or taxpayer dollars to support a privately owned railroad to build that station?
I do. I mean, that's the short answer. The delivery of transportation infrastructure and transportation operation it comes at a high cost. And I think that the broader community, there are sections of the community that don't like it. There's sections that love it. But overall, a healthy community has a diverse transportation system. And we tend to pick something and look at that cost. But if you looked at, like, the cost of the turnpike, the cost of a 995 interchange, the cost of the turn lanes, I mean, the intersection to improve, it's $9.5 million to add 2 lanes to an intersection. That's a big cost. So numbers are big, and the operating costs they are covering, and that's a bigger cost. So I think that over time, as long as they're in operation, and I don't think if they were to stop operations, I think that there would be another user, just like we're seeing with some of the rail or the air transportation where there's a demand, it's going to come back. But I think it's going to be a great resource for us. I think we need to make sure it gets designed properly, that we don't have a negative impact, in the city, if that's where it ends up being. And so, yeah,
Okay, very good. So, following up on that, if federal or state grants require additional county funding but beyond the current commitment, would you support contributing more local taxpayer money?
that I would have to evaluate, because I don't know where it fits in the context of the overall budget and where we'll be with the ad valorem. There are a lot of transit projects in the long range plan, and which amount to a lot of money. And so I think we'd have to evaluate, does Brightline do more for us than these other projects? If we could shift things around, but I don't think we just add an additional burden. We fit it in. If that becomes necessary, that's what the evaluation would be.
And then the final bright line areas that Florida East Coast Railway has indicated it would not permit a station near those sailfish ball fields there in downtown Stewart. If that location is no longer feasible, should Martin County continue pursuing a station? And if so, should the fairgrounds be considered as an alternative location?
I talked to the county. I reached out to see if they had some information on the fairgrounds site. I mean, it appears they've got the ability for the platform and space there. I don't know where it fits in with the intersections to either side and how they come alongside, with the fitting it in there and slowing
Mhm.
down, speeding up. And there's also another project that's been in and out of the books, and I'm not sure where it is. It seems like I go and look at it, but the grade separation for Dixie and Monterey, that's
Mhm.
been a long term kind of on the back burner. And we if that's a project that we want at some point, I think it's necessary for health and safety. We don't have the two sides with the rail. Having a grade separation would be great. So I need to see if when they design that, what's going over what, so how does the rail fit in, and does it, would that the grade separation impact that? But, FEC, I think that's still a conversation that could be had at the other location, but
Mhm.
I think we've got some time to figure it out.
And then moving on, and another fairgrounds type of question. Many residents have suggested using the Martin County Fairgrounds as the location for a homeless shelter. You mentioned it a little bit earlier. Do you believe that is an appropriate location?
Short answer, I'm going to say no. I think that that location is central to the city. There have been a lot of proposals on that site as being just a key focus of the city. And I don't think a homeless shelter is what you highlight in your community. Not to say that diminish the needs of people, but that is a prime location for showcasing Martin County. And so I think it needs to be a showcase piece.
And then the follow up to that, two parts. Does Martin County need a permanent homeless shelter? And if so, what factors should determine where it is located and how should it be funded?
That's one of the reasons I want in the first 100 days take a look at this, is because I don't know the answer to it. Because one of my opponents had brought it up, and it's something I don't quite agree with, that we're all one step away from homelessness. That homelessness is a complex problem, and it typically reflects a series of steps in someone's lives before they get to that point. And so it's not necessarily a one step, like you took all these steps and ended up homeless, and now we're going to give you a home, problem solved. So I think we need to understand, and maybe there's people out there that already do, but the solution hasn't been solved. There hasn't been a solution. I do think there needs to be some type of shelter, but we need to understand. The sheriff. That's why I wanted to meet with law enforcement. They had a pod for, I think it was 70 beds for a mental health facility at the jail, and that we lost some funding for this last round, and that may be an appropriate something that we need for short term for people who are having mental health issues. But we've got to figure out, how are people getting to that point? Like, what are the warning signs that we can prevent people from getting to that point? And I think New Horizons and Project Lift are two entities that have been working diligently in that mental health space to work with our young people to make sure that they've got the tools they need to not continue down a path, that they are giving them ability to seek some help, and also get jobs to be able to support themselves and get through that situation, whether it be a temporary situation or a long-term thing that they're going to have to handle throughout their lives. So I know that's a long answer, but I'm thinking about it a lot, and
Right.
I want us to come up with a good answer. I worked in San Diego County with his father. There was a priest who set up a whole village, but when he tried to take that same model and move it to other places, it wasn't as effective. But, there were a lot of rules for people to stay in the home. They had a job force training where they took them out, and so they could help fund the shelter, and there were a lot of things in place around it. So I think there's a lot to think about, and I'm leaning towards, yes, we need something, but what it looks like, I don't know.
Okay. And just backtracking on the sheriff's, the mental health unit that they were looking for, I'm with you on that. I was disappointed. I think they were looking for like 7.8 million, just under $8 million. And It's unfortunate, but that grant was denied, but,
Well,
I
the
guess
thing
we
is
can.
you have to recognize we need to make sure we're working with them again next year.
Right,
Next year is another year, and we don't wanna just go, "Oh, we tried, and
right.
too bad." We wanna make sure we've got all our alliances in order, and next year, we
Hopefully, we get it. Now, since the forum on July 7, what is one issue you wish you had more time to explain to the voters?
geez, do I remember July 7th? Because we did one July 9th. So
This is the one where I was your moderator.
oh, no, well, I started to go into this lengthy conversation about concurrency. I mean, there's a ton of things to talk about, but it's another area that it seems like a small thing, but when people talk about concurrency and there's a concurrency that happens at the project level, but a project when it comes in has a limited thing that they can do. It's like a little project's not going to 4-lane a road, right? But the big thing we do is this long range transportation plan every year, or every 5 years. And it kind of sets the pattern for where the money's going to go. And it's super important, but it goes to a consultant and then people meet. It's got a process. I'm not saying it doesn't, but one of the things that I think it's done rather quickly. And the last one that I participated in was 2045. There's a computer modeling that gets done, and it doesn't always reflect what we have in our comprehensive plan. And it gets done by a consultant. I started to explain the Bieber population. The University of Florida gives you population, and they tell you how much your county is going to grow. Like you don't get to decide, we're not growing that much. But we allocate where the growth goes, or the consultant does. But we make decisions very specific to an area. But this model is this big, ginormous model that doesn't always equate to what's really happening. And so we use this tool to set up our funding, and it could be like not, we started with the analysis being a little bit too gross, and then we're expecting everything to be refined based on that information. So I think we could do a better job on the input side of things so that we are making decisions with data that actually matches reality. So that's just a little thing. I know Chuck Wynn brought that up, and it was one of the pet peeves I had when, using the long range transportation plan. But, we did our
A
best to
Right, right.
get it
Thank you.
right.
A proposed constitutional amendment, you brought it up earlier, will significantly reduce or eliminate property taxes, is going to appear on the ballot this November. So, what is your position on that amendment?
So, one of the things I said is I'm leaning towards support of the amendment for one primary reason. I think that we, in trying to be good stewards of the money of the people, they've sent it to us, have kept giving reasons why. And I'm not saying, well, I'm not in office, but elected people have come up with a lot of reasons why we didn't accomplish what we told them we would, like helping to alleviate the pain and the cost of housing. And I don't know if they don't smack us around a little bit that we won't try to fix it. And so if we have to endure, like I know it's not exactly right, but it's like the first year is like 6% loss. And I know it's not like ad valorem, you can't replace it with other things. So it might have a greater impact than that. But I think we have a little bit of time to figure it out and demonstrate to people that we are going to address affordability and we're going to be serious about it. The state should not be like, the state should have reduced taxes in some way, instead of demanding the locals do it. There's a disconnect between the state and local, and the residents are going to be the ones who get screwed in the process. And so, there's going to be some people who will have a benefit. But maybe it gets everybody back to the table to come up with real reform. If ad valorem tax is the way we're doing it, maybe we need to do a better job with it. If it's not ad valorem, then what does it look like? I mean, but I think that people are frustrated. We didn't do anything about insurance. We didn't do anything about cost of housing. And so that's if it passes, I'm committed to. I've talked to a couple of the legislators about, because the state originally was going to have a slush fund, or not, put a pool of money to try to help
Ease
the
the
locals.
pain, right? Right.
Exactly. So I talked to them about, is there a way to take some of that sales tax and give it back to the locals so the locals could administer what
Mhm.
they need? Because we know what we need better than they know what we need. But,
Right.
foregoing that, I also talked about trying to look at some of the life cycle cost and replacement cost of things that aren't as painful to eliminate from a budget. They may have downstream cost, but short term savings giving us time to deal with the repercussions while we figure something out. So,
And if that does pass, what area of the county government would you reduce first?
well, that's where I was saying I think I would look to those life cycle costs. So where you have maintenance that you do every certain amount of time, or you replace a vehicle every certain amount. So whatever's up, we try to extend the life of that and push it out a little bit. It's sort of like
Mhm.
you get your teeth cleaned every 6 months, but you could do it every 9 months, and then in 2 years you've done it 3 times, and the dentist won't like it, but you
Right,
save some money. So that's kind of, if we can do that, that would be the least painful in the short term, but it's not a long-term solution at all. But there is no long-term solution. It's really just kind of like a shot in the arm, guys,
right.
fix stuff for us. And I think we need to take that.
It's got to start somewhere, right? I
Yeah,
mean, if
I
we have
think we
to
have
make
to
a
start
cut,
somewhere. I think people really want to see meaningful reductions or solutions somehow, whether it's, if we could fix the insurance thing, and
oh boy.
maybe the roof, like when I talk about life cycle costs, I know, at some point I had several rentals, and the roof's perfectly good, nothing's wrong with it, but you can't get insurance. Now, so
Right,
people are out replacing the roofs, or they're waiting for a hailstorm so their insurance can pay for it because they're desperate. And those are the things that drive up costs unnecessarily. And I don't know, there's a cost, and there's always someone at play in that,
right.
insurance and the builders, and so it's, but there's a lot of things out there that we could do, and nobody wants to be the one to give up their piece.
Right,
So,
right. It's kind of like we're talking about taxes, but that's kind of the joke with government and taxes, right? Once you're taxed, it's never going to be reduced or taken back, which maybe it will be here, but
yes.
we're all used to it. We spend it and something will have to give. So
Yeah.
it'll be interesting. Now, on the flip side of that, what services would you consider essential and protect at all cost?
But I think, fire and safety, I think the number was thrown out the other day that it's like 40% of our budget. And fire and police, or sheriff. And I think, sorry, my phone's going to fizz and just,
It's okay.
I think that, I mean, that
Campaign
reflects the
season.
importance it's been to people, you know, first responders. It's very important to everything. The community that we enjoy. We want to have a safe community. We want to know, and I've been saying about, like, the sheriff. They're the good cop, bad cop. They're going to pull you over if you're speeding, but they're the first ones who show up when your kid can't breathe. So it's, the fire and EMT get there, but these guys important to us. And
They
so
are.
I think, we make sure we have that intact. Having said that, if there's areas in those budgets that are facility focused, or something that's not, central to providing those essential services, but
Right.
and then again, so
Okay.
that would be the area that I'd focus on. And
Okay.
of course, if the other ones, I'm pretty sure, are protected through the enterprise zones. Trash, 100%. Water, all
Right.
that should be enterprise zone, fee base, that won't be affected by ad valorem. But it's not going to. It's not going to survive long term. There's no.
Right.
I don't have any sense that we're going to strip down government that people don't want. Martin County people want low taxes, but they want a quality of life. So there's a balancing. You want a great quality of life, but not an indulgent quality of life. So
Right,
that's
right. Now, county government has grown substantially over the past decade. This is partially why this is going to be on the ballot, not just our county, but across the state. Do you believe the county government has grown too large, is about the right size, or still needs to expand? And what metrics do you use to determine whether government is the right size?
So I would say that I wouldn't see county government growing, and I've not gotten all of the details in my head yet. However, we've grown about 50% in the last 8 to 10 years, which seems out of line. So I think we do need to go back and look at what is being spent and what is the role of government. But it's the size is relative to what we're providing. So we have metrics already in our comprehensive plan, and they tie to our budget. So, which is the levels of service. So, if one of the things that, like, the when you tie impact fees in, like the Newfield development, for example, built a lot of its own parks, and those parks are open to the public and fire station, that kind of thing that keep everything the level of service in check so we don't need to add. But the level of service, if it's so many parks per person, if people decide like they're looking around and going like we're over capacity on parks, but I think that, and I'm not saying we are, but I think we are. But if we are over level of service, like sometimes we think things are sacred, like you could never not improve a park or you could never, but if we're already over level of service and people are starting to feel the pinch, then maybe we don't do this next park project. Not because we don't love parks, but because we have a ton of them and we don't have enough money to do this other thing that is also important.
Mhm.
So there is that context. And a lot of times we don't address that, that the level of service has been satisfied. So we don't need more of that. And that's where I think it grows because people say, yeah, well, I like that. You can't say no to a park. You can't say no to a this. And then all of a sudden you don't have money to do something else that somebody else thinks is important. So I think looking at the metrics we already have in place and seeing where we perhaps are above level of service and could make some adjustments would be a good place to start.
Martin County continues to face pressure for both residential and commercial growth. What do you believe is the appropriate long term balance between residential development, commercial and industrial development, and preserving agricultural and conservation lands?
I don't know that there's a perfect number because we don't operate just within city boundaries or county boundaries. We're going to have the impacts of Indiantown, Port St. Lucie, and Palm Beach County that, and I don't mean just the impacts from those, but people are allowed to cross the borders, and they can live in one place or the other. So you can have that balance, but a lot of it's going to end up in this. You have a balance of employment. There has to be within a certain proximity of employment. You have to
Mhm.
have employees, and we all kind of know. At least people should know this. Retail doesn't come in until the end. Everyone always says, "Why didn't they put in an ice cream store? Why didn't they do?" Last thing that's coming in. They're going to wait till demand is there. Sometimes people will bank land just like the school does. The school will keep land because they know they're going to have a future need or something like that. But mostly your industrial wants to make sure they have people to work. So I think that things, I don't know what the exact number is. I think we've been doing a better job of bringing in employment and focusing. I like this idea of the airport where we're moving the operations center things out of there to open that up for airport related
Mhm.
industry. I would like to see us. I always say this. My middle son went to Florida Tech, and it's a local college. It's private, but it's got a lot of technical people there. I'd like to see us establish a better relationship with them. I know when I had my engineering firm here, very hard to recruit engineers into Martin County, and I think that's true of a lot of the industry here. It's been a difficult area, and some of those other relationships might help. But I don't think there's a magic number. We have to evaluate it and be prepared to pivot when necessary because we just don't know like what the next industry is going to be. Works great in other areas. Maybe it didn't catch on here. We tried a few live work places around, but other areas love that. The big box warehouse stuff was good for a while. Now we're going to more high intense. For some reason, we had a lot of storage, but industrial storage came out along 76. That's a great project for the county and in terms of employment and tax base. So I think it's just a constant. It's a constant. You can't just say this has to be this and this has to be that done. You know, One of the robotics guy, Dean, came and said a great thing about, during the healthcare issue, and it applies across the board to technology, that you can't have these policies that are so fixed that they don't account for changes in the real world. And I think that as the industry changes around us, that we just have to keep our eye on it, see what the mix is, what the people here need, and adapt to it.
It's true. I remember the county put out there was a study around the airport. You bring up the airport, and it's really a large industry for us here in the county. But I think one of the ideas for the fairgrounds was like a helioport because and they're coming. I think towards the end of this year, maybe next year. But these smaller I don't know what you want to call it, smaller airplanes. They're like a taxi. So, that's something that might be coming in there, and a transportation that we're not even using right now or thinking about. So you're right.
Exactly.
It's good to be flexible. So taxpayers do expect every dollar to be spent wisely. What county department, program, or spending priority do you believe deserves the greatest scrutiny over the next 4 years and why?
Geez, the greatest scrutiny? I mean, I'm not seeing one that's standing out to me I mean, because the biggest amount of money is in our capitally is in the beaches, restoration, the
Mm.
maintaining all of the waterways, and I look at that, and that's what another one of those areas that I say, like, nothing should be sacred. Like, just because we want the beaches to be protected and we want our water to be clean doesn't mean we want to be taken advantage of. So I think some of those that have the big, have a lot of contracting, and they're super important projects, but that doesn't mean we can't take a look at them. But I think all of the departments you keep your eye on, and just evaluate them out of the same, efficiency, and make sure things are in keeping with industry norms. But there's nothing that jumps out to me, per se, that I feel is being mismanaged. But I think it's more of well intentioned, and maybe we need to. It's okay to say no sometimes.
So many candidates campaign on the need for change. Specifically, what would you do differently than the current county commission?
Well, I think the change for me from the existing commission is just paying a little bit more attention to being a little more proactive, I guess, than reactive in the area of transportation. I mean, I think that also that we could do, I don't want to say a better job, but where we had the issue with the buildings and people were upset. I mean, sometimes you need the details, like a little spreadsheet showing all of the cost of all those things, because I could run that out and it made sense to me. But sometimes that information, instead of getting defensive, or you can just put the numbers out there. But on the other hand, I get it. Sometimes people aren't really looking for answers. They're just looking for fodder. And so you're trying to balance that. But for me, the proactive, because I hear people talk about traffic all the time, and the blame is always, well, we can't control what's happening in Port St. Lucie and in Palm Beach County, or it's blamed on development. And as a result, we don't do anything about it. Or I won't say don't do anything. It doesn't seem to be the focus of anyone on the commission. So for me, I think, they have their other focuses, and I think they do a good job in those areas. And so for me, I'd like to make transportation again one of those proactive things that we address.
Another question here. What is one decision made by the current commission over the past 4 years that you believe was a mistake, and how would you have voted differently?
Oh my goodness. I don't know if I could name a mistake. Maybe I'm not drilled into the everyday actions that they have taken, but as a person living here over the last few years, there's not a change that I felt that drastically altered my life, where I said, "Man, I wish this hadn't happened," or "Who's in charge of this?" And so, I mean, honestly, when I was asked by other people to grade the commission, I felt as a person on the receiving end, and maybe not, the first 2 years I was at the commission more often because I was still working. The
Mhm.
last 2 years I haven't been working. So I'm more just feeling it. And I said, I would probably give them, an A or B. I think there's, a few C's in there on things that, I would like to see us handle better with transportation. So I said, I'd probably end up with like a B plus or an A minus, because I think they've done a great job establishing the relationships on water. I mean, we had some major big deals, and, with Lake Okeechobee, and
Right.
with the south side of the lagoon. So, that those are big wins. And so I think that we've had some scrappy issues, and I think Brightline is an area that, is it a mistake? I don't know. I think it's a challenge now, and we've got to get back on track with it, because it's just an issue that needs to be resolved. It shouldn't be hanging out there causing angst. And so,
Very good. I'm sure they'd be happy to hear that, the current commissioners. So there is no wrong answer here for
yeah,
sure.
and it's not to say that if there's something somebody's been doing that people are opposed to, I'm not saying that I approve of it. I'm just saying unaware of any gross
Right.
errors that these guys have made. So
Moving on, you've never served on the county commission. Some voters may see that as bringing a fresh perspective, while others may question your experience. Can you give voters an example from your career where you made a difficult or unpopular decision because you believed it was the right one?
difficult or unfavorable decisions. I mean, I've probably made a lot of them. I've run a business for 35 years. I made one a long time ago that I wouldn't make again. I made it a decision. It was a popular decision that turned out to be unpopular. When I was in California, a county went bankrupt and left us with a huge, unpaid
Mm.
bill. And it was happening to a lot of companies in California. And I made the decision to cut staff to half time instead of firing full bodies. And I learned a valuable lesson in that no one was really happy with that, right? And I didn't really know what to do. And I had a hard time letting people go. But I realized, that you have to protect the entity that's ultimately going to rehire them, which was the business, which was me. And so I needed to learn to make the hard decisions to keep that business in place. So when things got straight, when I could figure out how we're going to overcome this huge situation, we can put everybody back in place. So that's how I operated from there. So that's one example about making a tough decision. Another decision, unpopular. It's a small. I guess maybe I'm giving you small examples, but I think they speak to my character. I had an applicant who wanted to make some kind of presentation where I presented some negative information about my. There was another applicant who was opposed to us, and they wanted us to do some kind of a presentation. And I said, I don't do that. This is a technical presentation, and I'm not going to do that. Now, the client wasn't happy. And I said, well, then I'm not working for you because this is my job. I work for myself and I have my code of ethics that I answer to. So he said, fine, do what you think is best. And we stayed on. The opponent did a bad slide about me and said negative things about me, which the ironic thing is we were basing our analysis on his prior analysis. It's a long story, but at the end of the day, he was a younger man, saw me at a party maybe a month later and said, hey, Susan, I'm really sorry about that. Business is business. And I said, it's not business business doesn't have to be that way. And I told him that I was asked to do the same thing. And I said, I told my clients, no, you need to learn to tell your clients no. So he came up to me a few weeks later and he said, I thought about what you said and I lost a lot of sleep about it. He said, but I learned a very valuable lesson. So I think, decisions are hard. You make them and you grow from them, and people around you can grow from them as well.
How would you describe your leadership style?
I have a very tough leadership style, I would say. But I guess I would say I have a two-tier approach to leadership. In my own business, I drive myself very hard and I expect people who work for me to be doing the same thing. When I've worked for the county, when I was a volunteer, those are not direct reports to me. This is not a business. And so my leadership changes to more of we're not necessarily time driven, money driven. So the leadership is probably more how it should be at my own business, collaborative. And I try not to sweat it, the deadlines and whatnot. But that's a part of me that's still gonna be there, deadlines and expectations. But I would never ask anyone to do anything I do not do myself. It's not like you do this. If I'm there till 8 o'clock at night, and that's been a problem. I've never asked my staff to do that, because I felt bad about that. I don't have, kids anymore, but I'm a very driven person, and I try to lead people in that direction. But I've learned to take people's strengths and fit them in accordingly, because people's gifts are different and they're
Mhm.
applied differently, and I work within that.
So the next section, Susan, a little bit quicker. If you could answer yes or no, and if you want to offer a brief explanation, that's fine as well. So, first one is, do you support additional residential density?
I'm not sure I understand what you mean.
Well,
An
it's kind of
increase
a
in
tough question.
density to the
Yeah,
categories
right,
or
and increase. I mean, it's probably going to happen. Do you support additional? So there's going to be a lot of applications coming in. Part of it is land use. It's kind of a one of those questions. I understand it can be tough. I'm trying to understand your overall feelings on growth in the county. Do you support
so
additional
from okay, so
residential? Not, you know.
do I don't support changes to the land use categories to increase density, if that's what the question is. I don't have an issue with the existing tools that are in place that how density is calculated. So
All right. Do you support data centers?
that I'm going to explain. I don't think for me it's a if a data center we're going to have to make if there was a data center there'd have to be some kind of conditional use application for it in the county. It would have to be reviewed. So for me it's the data center is being proposed in response to a need for infrastructure for AI. So, there's a whole moral and ethical debate about AI, but assuming I have no say in that if a database is needed to support that, then I would look at it as I would another application. What are the impacts to the community? Make sure that it's a net, that we're not harmed by it, and and address it from that quantitative, and then which the quantitative rules are put in place to protect our quality of life. So
Do you support FLAC cameras?
the plot cameras, I don't know a lot about that. I just heard about it the other day, the AI cameras. I'm not a big camera fan. I don't wear watches that track me. My shopping data still thinks I'm, a man who lives in Miami. But I try to think, what does everybody else want and need? I don't really love surveillance, but a lot of what we're using, that people aren't aware. I mean, big data has been part. When I went to the intelligent transportation systems many years ago to talk about up and coming technology, all the big tech companies were there, and getting all the local agencies to get data collection for them. Every street, everything, Zoom, everything's collecting data and it's being sent. And so we're constantly, but again, that's so I'd have to see what they're used for. But my broader, I didn't like the guy filming my house either. I'm more of a private person but everybody who says they're tracking their heartbeat and their sleep, and they got a device telling them they didn't get a good night's sleep. I don't need a device to tell me I didn't get a good night's sleep.
Right.
But anyway, I digress.
Okay. Next one. Do you support holding one evening county commission meeting each month?
I do. I think if people attend and they want to attend, I think it's a good idea to make sure we're getting representative that the community is able to attend.
And do you support expanding conservation land purchases?
I do. I mean, we just passed a sales tax for the purpose of purchasing. And I like the idea because I think it takes a lot of pressure off of, people worrying about, something they love. They'll know somebody's got the money to protect it.
Do you support term limits for county commissioners?
I do.
And do you support public private partnerships for major county projects?
I do.
Many residents feel their voices aren't being heard until after major decisions have already been made. If elected, what specific changes would you make to ensure citizens have a meaningful input before, not after the county commission votes?
So, I mean, I'm going to be real honest about this. I think this is a great question, but you may have heard me say this before. I know we're going way long, but I had a lot of friends who I think are in the group who doesn't like me anymore. But they used to come out in opposition to the projects. And I said, why don't you guys let me come and meet with you and tell you and show you where you should be interjecting in the process? Because a lot of people, there are many, many places to get involved in the public process, but most people don't pay attention until it gets to the point where it's so far gone. And so then, people are frustrated, whether it's a staff project or it's a private project. They've been sending out all their requirements, things are posted. And so I think maybe there needs to be some kind of a one-page instruction or something that's on the county's website that says, these are the places that you should look. So like if you're constantly seeing something and someone's saying, well, that's the rule, that's the rule. Okay, well, is it every 7 years we evaluate the comp plan and LDRs can be evaluated, land development regulations? can be evaluated earlier. So if someone's having a problem, you know, get involved at that level. If a project's coming forward, if it's a public project, there's a budget every year. So like a project that's going to come out, like a building is in that budget for many, many years before it gets to the point that, maybe on the development side, the public, the department whose project it is going to be frustrated now because you're in the year they're ready to go out to contract, but no one said anything for the 5 years before. So I think that maybe there's some, and I don't want to say education be like in a negative way that people need to be educated, but there is a missing point there that people are frustrated on both sides, but it's a lack of knowledge of both sides. So the public sector side, if we could do some kind of a chart or graph or table or something that people can check and see, but I mean, I've seen it just too many times that people coming in at the end, and I've sat in many an empty public hearing that people did not attend, and then all of a sudden, and yeah, it's unfortunate, but when someone has invested a lot of money, whichever side you're on, it's hard to think about starting over at that point. So the best time is to intervene early in the public review process. But it's not always as interesting, you know what I mean?
Right.
And maybe people don't really understand it, but that would be my suggestion because there are many, many opportunities for the public.
For
And
input.
yeah,
What question aren't voters asking that they should be?
well, frankly, there are a lot of I mean, I think have gotten a lot of good questions about my background, and there I've been to I don't know how many forums, or I've filled out so many different questionnaires, and everybody's questions are a little bit different, so it's been a lot to think about. So I don't know that there's a question that I really haven't been asked at this point. That I think one thing I would share is that for people who don't know about me, I was one of 8 children born in Miami, and I went to Vanderbilt, worked in West Palm. I worked a lot of hours, ended up being transferred out to California to start the offices for that company out in California. And a year later, I started my business. I got married. We had our house burned down in a house fire. So I share that just from a standpoint of going through that process. It took almost 2 years. I had to file the certificate of occupancy and design that building to get back in because we were having trouble dealing with all of the emergency, paperwork. We got screwed by a couple of contractors. But I say that just to share, like, things not easy. Things aren't always easy. And you go through, I lost a daughter 2 years after that. Then we moved back to Florida. So it's, life changes over the years. And I'd like to say that 2 years from now, I know exactly what's going to happen. 4 years, I know it's not, but because I don't. But what I can say to you is that I have had a vast experience in my life, and I respond quickly, and I may get a little stressed out, but I get it done. And that's what I bring to the county.
So you kind of just answered this next question, but I'm going to ask it in case you want to expand on anything. If you had 1 minute to speak directly to undecided voters, why should they trust you with their vote?
I would say trust me because I have a history of being a very ethical person, and I have the skill set to I'm qualified to do the job. I don't just want the job. I'm not going to make it about me. If you watch my videos, I'm not a professional. I'm really trying to get out what I understand about the county, what I would like to do in the county. And, I have the time, and I've been saying I have the time, I have the talent and the treasure to get this job done. And you're really going to get the benefit of a county commissioner who's thoughtful. I'm going to listen to you. I'm going to have the time to get out in the community and really hear what everybody has to say. And you're going to get the benefit of having another engineer that they're probably going to be sick of me meddling. But I think I really can be helpful. And when you don't have the pressure of time and, a supervisor over your head, you can be very creative and very purposeful. And so I would ask for the residents' vote on the 18th. And I look forward to showing up for you guys.
And the final question, it kind of goes along the same idea. There are 3 candidates competing for the open seat. What sets you apart, and why are you the best choice to represent District 2 from those other 2 candidates?
Yeah, I think I also mentioned that both candidates, when were asked about the first 100 days, said that 100 days would be for learning. Christopher Collins went on to say that it'd probably take a year or two to really fully understand the county. I'm ready to go. I know there's things that I don't know, but there's enough I do know that I'm going to be earning my keep from the beginning. And I'm not going to leave my job early, which, Chris Collins left his job at the city of Stewart early. And there was a lot of chaos caused unnecessarily. You can disagree, but you don't need to be shouting at your constituents from the dais. And things do get difficult, and there are hard decisions that need to be made, and we need to be equipped to make them. And we need to, at the end of the day, be able to look at each other and work together to solve because we are a small community. I mean, it's if you're going to do that at the city of Stewart, which is like, a family picnic, and you can't get along, then how are you going to get along at the county where there are going to be more people who potentially disagree with you? And we've got to work together for the entire county. So at the end of the day, we're a cohesive group and we're not a mockery. We want to be able to get these critical things we need. We're going to have a huge issue coming up in November and we're going to have to work through it. And so I am the one who has those skills, who's going to stay at it and I'm going to be civil throughout the process.
Well, Susan O'Rourke, we are down to the very last question. I appreciate you taking time here this afternoon and just getting to know you a lot better. How
Oh,
can voters support your campaign and learn more about you?
well, there's a number of ways. You can check out my Facebook page, which is Susan O'Rourke Campaign. But my personal my personal Facebook actually has more because I am trying to connect everything together, but not doing that quite right yet. But I'm going to be out and about. You can call me at 772-475-8088 and set up an appointment for me to come and talk to your group. We'll be out in the neighborhoods talking. I think we have one more forum at Monrovia next Wednesday, and possibly in Indiantown on Thursday. I've got to check if that's all for county or not. But definitely, if you see me out running, feel free to stop me. I'll be wearing a Susan O'Rourke for County Commission shirt, and that's or see one of my friends and ask questions about me.
That's it. And that's Wednesday the 15th, the new Monrovia Forum. This show will probably be released that day. So I want to make sure people know what Wednesday we're talking about. And Susan, as you said, folks, all of these county commission races will be decided on August 18th. It's so important to vote. They don't wait till November, it'll be too late. So again, August 18th, there's mail out ballots that are going out already. There's going to be early voting, and then finally on that day itself, August 18th. So finally, don't forget to follow the Casey Ingram Show on Facebook and subscribe on YouTube for more conversations that help voters hear directly from the candidates. I'm Casey Ingram. Stay informed, stay engaged, and I will see you on the next episode. Thank you, Susan O'Rourke.
Thank you.